You're not going to believe what happened to me yesterday. My name's Marcus, and I live in a pretty quiet, upscale neighborhood. After years of working my tail off, putting in late nights, missing weekends, sacrificing vacations, I finally managed to buy my dream home. A solid brick house with a beautiful front yard, an extra-long driveway, and yes, a gated entrance. Security's always been important to me, especially after everything I've been through. And besides, it's not like I'm the only homeowner on the block with a gate. In fact, I'd say half the houses on this street have security gates, and nobody bats an eye. Anyway, yesterday afternoon, I was out front watering my roses. Don't judge. They're stunning when they're in full bloom, and I'm proud of them. I had my headphones in, listening to some jazz while I worked when I noticed a woman standing at the foot of my driveway. Arms crossed, lips pressed tight, face twisted like she'd just bitten into a lemon. I didn't recognize her. She wasn't someone from the HOA or a neighbor I'd seen before, so I figured maybe she was lost or possibly canvassing for a local politician. I gave her a polite nod, a casual wave, and went back to tending my garden. But that's when it started. "This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous," she shrieked, her voice slicing through the peaceful afternoon like a siren. I turned off the hose and took out my earbuds, walking toward her slowly, carefully. No sudden moves. Just a friendly homeowner trying to make sense of an unexpected situation. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" I asked, keeping my tone as calm and even as I could. She glared at me, eyes narrowed, cheeks flushed deep red. "No, everything is not all right. This fortress you've built is an eyesore, a blight on this neighborhood. And frankly, it's suspicious." I blinked. I wasn't quite sure what I was hearing. "Excuse me," I said carefully. "Don't play dumb with me," she spat, her words sharp and jagged. "This gate, it's excessive. What are you hiding? What are you doing in there that requires this much security?" And right then, I knew exactly where this was headed. I've had that feeling before, like a low rumble of thunder before the lightning strikes. It wasn't about the aesthetics. It wasn't about the gate. No, it was about me. About who I am and what I look like. A black man in a predominantly white, wealthy neighborhood. And suddenly, my HOA-approved gate wasn't just a gate. It was a threat, a sign of something nefarious in her eyes. "Ma'am," I said slowly, still trying to keep things civil, "this gate is here for my security, for my peace of mind. It's perfectly legal and approved by the Homeowners Association." She scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Regulations? You think I care about regulations? This is about what's right. And what's right is that this monstrosity comes down." Then came the kicker. She pulled out her phone, pointed it at me like a weapon, and announced loudly, "I'm calling the police. This is a clear security risk." I sighed. Here we go. She dialed 911 and launched into a dramatic performance worthy of an award. As I stood there holding the hose, trying to keep my temper in check, I caught bits and pieces of her call. Suspicious activity, unnecessary security. I feel threatened, doesn't belong here. The full Karen bingo card. I knew arguing with her would be pointless. She was already so deep in her own narrative, there was no pulling her out of it. So I waited. I figured the cops were going to show up sooner or later. All I could do was hope they'd see through her nonsense. As she ranted into her phone, I noticed a few neighbors peeking out through their blinds. Some stepped out onto their porches, curiosity, and something like embarrassment written on their faces. They knew what this was. They knew this wasn't about a gate. It was about her discomfort with me living here, with a black family living in their little bubble. Finally, she hung up and stuffed her phone back in her pocket with a triumphant little flourish. "They're on their way," she announced, practically vibrating with self-righteous indignation. "They'll see what you're really up to." I gave her a dry chuckle. Humorless, tired. "And what exactly is that, ma'am? Living in my own home?" "Don't get smart with me," she snapped. "You think you could just come in here and change things? This neighborhood has standards." I didn't respond. Anything I said would only make it worse. So I stood there, silent, watering can in hand, try to ignore the heat rising in my chest. The shame, the anger, because it wasn't just about the gate. It was about every sideways glance. Every whispered conversation, every little reminder that some people will never see me as belonging no matter what I do. About 10 minutes later, the sound of sirens broke through the tension. 2 patrol cars pulled up quietly. The officers stepped out, a man and a woman. They exchanged a glance as they walked toward us. I had a feeling they'd handled plenty of calls like this one before. The female officer, her badge reading Officer Reynolds, took the lead. "Ma'am, we received a call about a disturbance," she said, her tone calm but professional. The woman, her name, I'd later find out, was Brenda, launched into her tirade again. Hands flying, voice rising. She pointed at my gate, accusing it of being excessive, unnecessary, dangerous. She painted a picture of fear and suspicion. Officer Reynolds listened patiently, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to me. "Sir, can you tell us your side of the story?" I explained that I was the homeowner, that the gate was approved by the HOA, that this woman didn't have an issue with security. She had an issue with me. I pointed out the other gated homes on the block, how their security measures hadn't drawn any attention. Officer Reynolds nodded. She asked for my ID and proof of residency, which I provided without hesitation. While she was checking my information, the male officer, Officer Davis, walked over to the gate. He ran his hand along the ironwork, peered through the bars, took in a scene like he was putting together a puzzle. A few minutes later, Officer Reynolds returned my ID. "Everything seems to be in order here, Mr. Carter," she said. "The gate is permitted, and you're listed as the property owner." Brenda wasn't satisfied. Not by a long shot. "But what about my safety?" she demanded. "I feel threatened." Officer Reynolds' tone hardened just a bit. "Ma'am, feeling uncomfortable isn't a crime. Unless you have specific evidence of illegal activity, there's nothing we can do." That's when Brenda doubled down. "Well, I bet he's got drugs in there," she sneered. "Or illegal weapons. You need to search his house." I felt my stomach drop. Officer Davis stepped away from the gate and approached Officer Reynolds. They spoke in hushed tones. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I saw the flicker of surprise on Reynolds' face. Then she looked at Brenda, then back at me. Finally, Officer Reynolds turned to Brenda. Her voice had lost all of its earlier patience. "Ma'am, can you provide your full name and address for our report?" Brenda, puffed up with self-importance, rattled off her information without hesitation. Reynolds typed it into the patrol car's computer. The seconds stretched into minutes, thick with tension. Then the computer beeped. Reynolds' expression changed. Her eyes widened, and she exchanged a long look with Davis, who nodded grimly. "Ma'am," Reynolds said, her voice now flat and cold, "it appears there's an outstanding warrant for your arrest." Brenda blinked. "What? That's impossible. I haven't done anything." "The warrant is for embezzlement," Reynolds said quietly. "It appears you've been siphoning funds from your employer for several months." The color drained from Brenda's face. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Davis stepped forward and placed her under arrest. She twisted in his grip, glaring at me as he led her toward the patrol car. "This isn't over," she hissed. I just shook my head, disbelief washing over me. She'd been so busy accusing me, so focused on playing the neighborhood hero, that she hadn't realized she was the one with skeletons in her closet. As they drove away, neighbors started to come out. Some of them approached me, offering awkward apologies. Others admitted they'd suspected Brenda had racist tendencies, but hadn't expected her to go this far. One neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, an elderly woman from 2 houses down, confessed that Brenda had been spreading rumors about me ever since I moved in, calling me a drug dealer, accusing my wife of being a gold digger. I wasn't surprised. Disgusted, yes, but not surprised. Later that evening, Officer Reynolds stopped by again. She apologized for the inconvenience and explained that they'd been investigating Brenda for months. They hadn't had enough to arrest her until now. Apparently, Brenda had gotten careless. She was in deep debt, addicted to gambling, and had embezzled thousands from her company to stay afloat. Over the next few days, the story blew up. The local news ran with it. Suddenly, I was doing interviews talking about racism in affluent communities and how important it was to stand up to prejudice. Brenda was charged not only with embezzlement, but also with filing a false police report and hate crimes for falsely accusing me based on race. Her trial was a media circus. She tried to deny everything, but the evidence was airtight. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to prison. The revelations kept coming. Brenda's gambling addiction, her messy divorce, her spiraling debts. She'd been living a lie for years. And through it all, I kept the gate. Not out of spite. It made me feel safe. And honestly, it looked damn good next to my roses. The experience changed me. It reminded me that even in the quietest, wealthiest neighborhoods, racism still hides behind manicured lawns and white picket fences. But it also showed me that there are good people willing to stand up for what's right. And that, my friends, is something worth celebrating.